Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first ever podcast episode. I am your host, Roy Cruz, president and founder of MHS.
And I'm your co host, Adham Ibrahim, and I'm the Vice President of Creative Direction at MHS. And we hope you tune into each podcast as we discuss many men's health related issues and share our raw opinions in an uncut, unfiltered opinion discussion.
In today's episode, we will discuss minority discrimination and stereotypes and their impact on men's mental health. We invite you all to share your opinions and feedback on our website as we hope to hear your opinion on those topics.
So, to start off, I'd like to have introduce our first guest of the podcast, Ty.
Yeah, how's it going, everyone? My name is Ty. I go to Mac, as you can tell. I'm a second year enrolled in multimedia and communications, and yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Nah, thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
We're glad to have you, Ty. So, right now we have a pretty diverse group. Ty being a black man, I'm Egyptian, Roy's Mexican. I have a question for you guys. What type of stereotypes did you see about your own cultures kind of growing up?
Where do you start? You guys want to go ahead, or?
I guess we can kind of just take turns,
Yeah, Roy,
since you're a
go
guest, I
first.
guess you can kind of go first. No,
Okay,
no,
yeah.
since Ty's yeah,
Ty's
you can
guest.
kinda go first.
You can go first, Ty.
Me first? All right, cool. For me, typical stuff. I don't know, aggressive, because growing up, my public school for elementary, sorry, my elementary school was public, so it's quite diverse. We had many cultures and stuff like that. But once I got to high school, it was dominantly white. So stereotypes that I didn't really see in myself, but saw gradually as the years went on and on, were typically that I was more aggressive, that I mentally was slower than a lot of people, and just on a very typical things you see on social media today. But at the end of it all, it's not like it was, you know what I mean? It wasn't like it was something that I took to heart, because I don't know, when my family's known for having tough skin, and they kind of brought that on to our whole family. I don't know, that whole, you know what I mean? Like in life, you're gonna face diversity and go through things that aren't necessarily pleasant, but at the end of the day, you just gotta like suck it up and just keep going forward. So yeah, no, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's typical things, but stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I feel that because even like for example, I came from Mexico like 8 years ago now. So, even when I came here, like for me when I came, it was kind of just like a lot of stereotypes that I'd never heard before. Because in Mexico, like no one really makes fun of each other for being Mexican, right? So, coming here and having people say, "Oh yeah, like you're from Mexico," and like the cartel and like drugs and all of this, and I was kind of just like, it kind of took me like a little bit off because I was like, oh, is this what you guys think of Mexico, right? Like, it's kind of completely unfamiliar for me. So I don't know.
100%. Yeah, like in elementary school, like I mentioned before, just with it being so diverse, it's just like if anyone were to make fun of anyone, it's like it wouldn't be serious or regarded as to anything personal, just because everyone literally, like, we had people who were Middle Eastern, white, black, Asian, you name it. You know what I mean? So it was like it wasn't even like it was necessarily one group was more dominant than the other. And even if it were to be in that case, it's like we're all diverse. We're all like, you know what I mean? Coming from, I don't know,
Yeah, no, I feel that. I feel that.
stuff like that, for
That's
sure.
true. I mean, I've definitely experienced some of that too, like coming from Egypt. I had a lot of people that thought, like when I came here, everyone was like, oh, like, did you live in a tent? Like, oh, do you guys like ride camels around instead of cars? Do you guys have technology over there?
Yeah.
Some people that like couldn't believe it. They're like, you know how to use a phone? I'm like, yeah. That's like it's kind of universal. So it was
Yeah,
definitely
no, for sure.
there's definitely a lot of stereotypes that like you don't I didn't really see till I moved to Canada, and I was like, wow, that's how really the world thinks of us.
Yeah, and, like it makes me kind of wonder, like because I feel like a lot of kids here, like like I kind of came here when I was like 12, right? And you have kids growing up, and they have like they're surrounded by this like stereotypes, right? And
Mhm.
it makes you wonder like what do they think about it? Because I feel like they become so like desensitized, right? And so when someone kind of like like Ty said, right? Like when they say it, you don't take it to heart, right? And you don't really take much offense to it, right? But as you start getting older, like you kind of realize like, oh man, like it's pretty messed up the fact that the kids are out here making fun of like other people for their culture and stuff, and kind of like attaching like certain stigmas around it, right? So I don't know, it kind of makes you wonder like what effects may have like in that person as they grow older, right?
you
Especially for others who not necessarily have that tough skin. You know what I'm saying? So everyone's different.
you guys like think those stereotypes about your cultures kind of like affected you or like shaped you in a certain way as you grew up?
Hmm. I mean, I don't know, like shape me, but kind of made me like realize a lot of stuff that I kind of felt like it was a little messed up because you know, just like Ty said, like if you don't have like the tough skin, right, like to kind of like, you know, be able to like not think much of it, right? Like I feel like a lot of people kind of like start believing that type of stuff, right? And so like, you know, you sometimes have like stereotypes that like, oh yeah, like, you know, Mexicans are known for like selling drugs and all of that, right? And like, you know, I feel like a lot of kids like if they're not able to like distinguish or like, you know, make that differentiation between
Mm.
like the stereotype and like, you know, their culture, like they kind of grow up to like become that, you know, because they're kind of just being presented to like, oh, like this is what you're supposed to do, like, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Tag along to that comment. For myself, I take things in a very humorous ways. Like you can tell me the darkest joke, and to be honest, with you, I'll probably find light in it in some sort of way. I don't know. I feel like now that I sit down and actually like reflect on the whole someone saying something to you that can, you know what I mean, be seen as racist in one way. It's just like when you're accustomed to hearing that stuff and seeing it around you, sort of just like, all right, like it is what it is. Like obviously you can step up and like fix it, you can do something about it. But now that I'm just so accustomed to it, it's just like my way of dealing with stuff like that is definitely through humor. So it's just like back to what you were saying, sorry, with the way I deal and the way I see it is just like through a humorous way, and it doesn't necessarily like sitting with me, but who knows? Obviously I've had like those one or two like moments or even days where like you sit down and like reflect on like, you know, what are these like stereotypes necessarily true? Can they be like applied to like myself or like my family or just yeah, just people of my race, you know what I mean? But it's just like at the end of the day, like everyone's different in their own ways. So it's just like it's not necessarily fair to like pinpoint one characteristic or thing about someone and be like, that's what it is 24/7, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and you know, like even for example, like when we talk like strengths, right? Like just like you said, like your mechanism to kind of deal with this and not let it get to you is kind of just like you think about it like in a humorous way, right? Like you don't think much of it. And you know, I feel like, you know, like you said, like many people are different, right? And I know for sure, like, you know, some people they might not be able to like handle like, you know, certain things in a certain way, right? And so when they're presented with this like, you know, like stereotype or kind of joke and you know, they kind of do take that to heart, right? And so um, you know, I kind of feel like for those people, right, like they do definitely have some sort of like, you know, like problems as they grow older because, you know, they're not able to handle like, you know, that pressure that's like surrounding like, you know, like the racism or like discrimination. And, you know, I feel like that kind of makes them in a way kind of like it affects them as like it limits them because they don't believe that they can be anything beyond those stereotypes, right? And
Mm.
so they kind of feel like they have to fall into like that certain stereotype or you know they kind of need to follow within that path
Mm.
because you know for them it's just that's it, that's the ceiling for them. They're not able to, you know, maybe follow certain paths that other cultures may follow, right? Like when we talk about like, you know, white culture or you know like when we talk about you know like jobs that are mostly like, you know, white dominant or you know more something that you wouldn't see a minority necessarily take on, you know. So I
Mm.
feel like many of those people don't think that they can reach those levels.
Yeah, especially like to tag on to what you said as well. It's like as a youth, it's just like when you're hearing something about you repetitively, like over and over, that this is who you are, this is what you do, and if this is not what you personally do, this is what people are similar to you do all the time. It's just like your your understanding as a youth is like you're trying to grow into this person that you imagine yourself to be, and if it's just like this is what you're hearing all the time, you're gonna eventually become accustomed to that, and you know what I mean. You're gonna be like, all right, if this shoe is around my size, I guess it fits. You know what I'm trying to say? Rather than just make own or make sense of who they are as an actual person and what they like, rather than just something that someone else is influencing them to believe and to think. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, for sure. Because even like if you think about it, like even when Obama like became the first black president, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people like, you know, I think like a lot of black North Americans didn't even believe that that was possible, right? Because you know you see the president is like for many generations just being a white man, right? And so I feel like a lot of these like young boys who have like a lot of potential, but like you know it's like you know be great leaders, right? They kind of limit themselves to that point. They say, oh, like that's impossible for me to even accomplish, right? So
100%, yeah.
I think that's kind of sad, you know.
Made me laugh too because I remember when he won, I was like, wow, like a black guy wearing a suit in a joking way, but it's just like as humorous and as funny as it is, it's just like when you really think about that joke or like the meaning behind it, it's just like, all right, like clearly there's some sort of issue behind that meaning. Like, why would that be funny or why would that not necessarily be something that you can't see? You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah,
like
no, for sure.
illiterate and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, no, like I don't know about you guys, but like even for example, like when you think about the situation that's like happening like in the States, right? Like when Donald Trump was like in office, you know, the whole thing going on with Mexican stuff, right? Like you have people like, you know, like saying, oh, like, you know, like build a wall and all that stuff, right? And you know, it makes you think like all those Hispanic kids growing up in America, right? Like, you know, when they heard all the stuff, like, you know, like white people like saying, oh yeah, no, like, you know, you should go back to your country, but like, you know, that's their country, you know, like they were born there, and they kind of just like, oh man, like, you know, I kind of feel like those people, like those kids, especially, like they didn't feel like accepted, you know, and like in their environment.
100%.
The whole thing was go back to your country. It's hard home with me because I heard that a lot when I came here.
Mm.
Whenever I get a
Yeah.
notification, yeah. No, it happened to me recently too. I was with my parents in a Costco parking lot, and this person basically tried to cut us off to park. And then they looked out of the window and looked at us, and they're like, "This is my parking lot. Go back to your country. Go back to where you came from." And we're like, "We all have Canadian passports. We all pay taxes to. We are in our country. I don't know what you're talking about." So,
Would have whipped it on that shit at them at that point. Like what?
uh,
Yeah, exactly.
at at that point, my dad started freaking out. But then we just kind of convinced him to move along, keep your head down, which I feel like something that's kind of pushed out a lot. That's like, oh, if you experience that, just keep your head down, move it along, be the bigger person. But like the fact that you have to be the bigger person in the first place isn't a good thing. If that
You know,
makes any sense.
I kind of agree. I agree because like it kind of makes you like suppress like certain feelings back. You know, like at the end of the day, like you're the one that's being put in a really unfortunate situation, and you know it's unfair, right? And so for you to have to like suck those feelings back because, you know, well, you have to be the bigger person. You can't really say anything back, or you know, you don't want to be certainly attached to. You don't want to attach your culture with, you know, being aggressive or whenever there's confrontation, you know, always result into like, you know, verbal violence and stuff, right? So you know, it kind of doesn't let people kind of like express their feelings and kind of like really express what they are feeling, right? So I don't know, like I feel like it definitely has like some sort of impact on people because they're not able to speak their mind, right? So now you have like all these movements that have become like, you know, very extreme, right? Like as we saw in the last year, like, you know, all this protests and stuff. It's because like precisely because of that, right? Like I feel like people, you know, they've gone for so long, like, you know, like kind of holding everything that they've been meaning to say, and it just leads to like, you know, more violence. So I think like I don't know, man, that's kind of messed up in a way for me.
Exactly, because when you keep playing, when you keep being the bigger person and just like taking it and moving along, it all just kind of builds up, and it's not fixing the problem, and eventually it's all gonna have to spill out somehow. So there's that. I also think like it takes a toll on you mentally. Like honestly,
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of like, you know, if we kind of like relate this to like mental health, right? It's kind of just like, you know, it's the same thing when you're feeling a certain way, right? Like if you're feeling sad and all that, and you're not, you know, like we know that if you don't talk about your feelings and all that, right? Like it eventually leads to a person like to fall into like a state of depression, right? Because they're not, you know, they're not getting those negative feelings out, right? And so, you know, it kind of makes you wonder, like, you know, it's the same thing when people are kind of feeling like this discrimination, right? Like when they're not able to speak their mind, right? It's like, you know, I feel like it kind of creates more violence for sure because you don't have people like being able to talk about like, you know, the problem that's at face like right now, right? What is that going to result at the end? It's going to make people just, you know, latch out or like react in a more like violent manner, right? Because they're feeling like they're not being heard or respected, right? So I kind of feel like that's how like this 2020 2021 has been going on because precisely all that generational like, you know, like trauma of like not being able to speak, right? And people are kind of tired of it. So I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of things that we can for sure do better as a society, which is like kind of just like, you know, educate people, right? I feel like education is a big part of it. You know, I don't know about like you guys, but you know, growing up, I feel like um there's a lot of people that aren't really thought like, you know, respecting other people's culture and stuff. And so like for me when I came to, you know, to Canada, um I've seen a lot of like different cultures, like the diversity that's here, like it was all new to me. And like because in Mexico I only saw like, you know, people from my country. And so my parents, the first thing that they taught me there was like, you know, like these people are from different cultures, and you know you got to respect them because, you know, Canada is all about like multicultural, like, you know, like diversity and all that. So and I kind of feel like that's kind of something that it's kind of like, I don't know, like it's kind of missing here in Canada or even in the States because people grow up with all these like cultures around them, and you know, the parents don't really put a lot of focus on, you know, making sure that their kids are respecting other cultures because, you know, they're already like, you know, like living together, they're like associating with one another, so they feel like it's not as important. But I feel like even just kind of like telling them like and reminding them every day like as they grow up, like, you know, like yeah, like those people are different than you, but you know, it doesn't mean that you gotta disrespect them in any sort of way or that you're any better than them, right? I feel like that's something that people here often lack for sure.
You know what I always thought was a good idea?
What?
Like a middle school world cultures class that's like mandatory. And because I know it's like available in some high schools and it's like an optional elective, but like a world like cultures class that kind of just covers the cultures or at least the basics of like the different cultures in like middle
Mm-hmm.
school. I feel like that would be very helpful. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
just like so, like kids like grow up kind of like appreciating other people's cultures, like at least knowing of them.
Yeah, like I mean, like, I guess that's kind of just going back to like the education, right?
Yeah,
And it kind of makes you like, you know, like how is it that we can incorporate this and kind of make it so that more people are, you know, being educated or, you know, like we're able to like teach like, you know, kids what they're supposed to be doing as they grow older, right? And you know, I don't know like about you, Ty, or you know, even at him, I just like I don't know, I feel like it's very complicated, you know, when you're a kid and kind of just like trying to go against what like the adults tell you. Whereas like I don't know like if you guys ever had this like happen, but like you know that whatever's happening is wrong, but the adults aren't doing anything, and you're kind of just like standing there like, bro, like I don't know. Me personally, I think it's like messed up, but I can't really do anything about it. So I don't know. Yeah, like have you guys had that before? Or...
absolutely. On so much things, on so many things.
Like to
Yeah.
not even to add on a lot to what you said about that point, but to like I don't know, like a small little add on to that is like the best way to summarize that would be there's a time and place for certain things to be said and for certain things to be interpreted. You know what I'm trying to say? So like let's be real, like if you're 12 years old trying to like for an example, like so I know some cultures are very against like say homosexuals for an example. You know what I mean? You grow up in a family where like that's highly like something that's like not tolerated and so forth. And you're 12 years old, you're growing up, and your school is teaching you that you have to be not only just accepting, but more like you know what I'm trying to say. You have to
Be more welcoming. Like it's kind of
very
like
Yeah,
welcoming. Yeah, pretty much.
yeah.
It's just like when you're going to one environment where that's very welcoming, and you know what I mean, loving towards just all, and then you go back home where that's something that's taught against us. Like as a 12-year-old, it's like yes, you want to talk to your parents about something that's a very very like important topic, but it's just like as a 12-year-old, you know for a fact that your parents are not necessarily gonna like hear you out on that, but it's just like one of those. It's a tough situation. You know what I mean? It's just like
Mm-hmm.
18 compared to being 12, there's a time and place as to where there's certain topics and discussions that are meant to be shared and meant to be talked about. You know what I'm trying to say? Which is hard because growing up, like that is your family. That's who loves you. That's who's gonna like care, provide for you, and teach you certain things in life. But it's just like that's the tough part about growing up as a kid because you gotta make those own morals and make sense of things that aren't necessarily as clear as they may seem to be at the time of. If that makes any sense. It's just
Yeah,
hard.
no, I get that for sure. Because even for example, I feel like that describes like our generation pretty well. Like I feel
Yeah.
like you know, our generation is kind of like growing up to like develop like certain values as a whole, right? As a whole generation, and we're kind of going up against those, you know, old values that older generations may have, right? And so I don't know if you guys seen like on TikTok or like even like certain like Instagram clips or whatever, like of people like being kicked out just because they went against their parents' words and stuff, right? And like, you know, I kind of find that messed up because like, you know, like it's kind of like putting the kids in an uncomfortable situation where they're like, you know, the parents are not being understanding of like, you know, what they're doing is wrong, or you know, they're not being like they don't see what's wrong on what they're doing, right? And so like it puts the kids in an uncomfortable situation because even like Ty said, right, like you go to an environment where they're teaching you like, oh, be accepting of all, like you know, like you have to really respect everyone, right? And then you go to an environment where it goes completely against that, and you have like a lot more people saying for you to, you know, be welcoming, but then you have like a small group which is your family, and you know like at the end of the day like obviously you got to respect like your family, and like you know like at the end of the day like they're your people, you know. So
Mhm.
it's very conflicting. I don't know, like I feel like it's very, I don't know, it's for sure very
Exactly. And
conflicting.
with that being kind of like a tongue twister, and you know what I mean, a brain. What's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, you have to keep it PG, right? Sorry, it messes with your brain.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying so. With all of that triggering certain things as to what's right and what's not acceptable, it's more so just like this is like the discussion as it is. It's like yeah, race outside of your family is you know what I mean. Like there's people on the outside of your family who are going to judge you, who are going to make certain labels for you, and you know what I mean, put that onto you. But there's also things within your family that they may say and may try to influence you to think as well that may not be acceptable to society as is. So it's just like with all these things being put onto you as a minority as it is, you know what I mean? It's just like, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? What do you listen to? What do you know what I mean? It's more so just like it's even though it may seem the discussion of race as it is, it's just like there's a lot more to it that can weigh on minority as it is, which is interesting to look at. You know what I mean? Very intriguing to like, you know what I mean? Look into, but it's to be physically a part of that. It weighs a lot on you. You know what I mean? So it's a bigger picture type thing more than it may seem just to be like race. You know what I mean? Like it ties into multiple things.
And I feel like to build onto that a bit more, I feel like that's a lot where like generational prejudice comes from is people coming from families that are prejudiced or are racist, and then them being kind of afraid to change to like have their own build their own morals or something that they're being taught outside because they don't want to be abandoned by their family or they don't want to go against their family's words, which kind of just makes the whole issue go on from generation to generation.
Because let's be real, who wants to be vulnerable and who wants to be wrong? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
that's
just
true.
Who those two topics, sorry, those two things as it is, it's just like with those things being like major topics, it's just like who do you point at? Who do you blame for whatever it may be, and how do you grow from that? Which is the big picture, in my opinion. If that makes
and
sense. But
no,
yeah,
I completely agree because I feel like it kind of comes down to like the ego, you know, like I feel like a lot of people,
pride.
they don't like to be wrong, man. Like I feel like they're not humble or like, you know, they're not, you know, like that, like you said, like the pride overtakes them and like they don't want to change. And it's kind of just like, man, like you're that stubborn that you don't really see how messed up it is what you're doing.
Yeah,
Like,
and I feel like once people start to, you know what I mean, nod their head and be like, you know what, I'm not a perfect human being. Once, sorry, this is like an exaggerated quote, but it's like once humans can admit that they're not perfect, that's how you make a perfect society. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, no, I
Yeah.
completely agree, man. Like I feel like that's a really strong quote for sure because I completely think that as right now, like that's my man, like my mindset, you know, like, especially like, you know, with this club, right? Like that's kind of what I want to spread. Like, you know, like at the end of the day, like a lot of guys, you know, I feel like, you know, we're very like some, you know, I'm not gonna say like I wasn't prideful because I was before, you know, at a younger age for sure. I had a lot of pride, you know, and I didn't like to be, you know, wrong, and I didn't like to admit that, you know, what I was doing wasn't right. And my parents, you know, like they would say like, oh, don't do that, like, you know, and then I would go do it, and then, you know, you know, I kind of be wrong, and I'd be like, damn, I should have listened to my parents, but I don't want to accept the fact that I should have, right? And
Right.
so I feel like that's the like kind of what I want to spread, right? Even with regards to that quote, it's just, you know, we're not perfect, you know, and it's okay to admit that we're not perfect. You know, there's a lot of things that a lot of misconceptions in our heads that we have, and you know, like we kind of have to accept them. We have to be willing to change. We have to be willing to accept that, you know, what we're doing sometimes is very messed up, and I think that's the only way that we can move forward with, you know, like topics like this, right? Because everyone's, if they're willing to change, then, you know, they're more willing to be accepting of, you know, what they need to do to, you know, respect others or whatnot, right? So,
Live, learn, and grow. Simple.
hmm
Right.
and like I don't even know, I don't even remember, but like, you know, like the amount of times that, you know, like we would like in first year, like we kind of just like sit in the washroom and talk, and you just kind of just like,
Oh,
damn, bro, like we're doing this wrong or like we're messing up, and you know, I feel like that's kind of like what needs to come down to, like, you know, like I guess like you're just like you and your homies or like your friends, right? Like you say like, yo, bro, like that's kind of messed up what you're doing, or I don't know, man, like
For sure, yeah. Hold your group accountable the same way you'd hold yourself accountable. You know what I mean? It's like that's how you know what I mean? Like you live by doing the dumb stuff. You know what I mean? Like that's just how you are. Like we're young men, we're going to do dumb stuff. That's just how it is. Like it's university life, blah blah blah, X, Y, and Z. And then learning is just like you said, you're sitting down, you're like, all right, like personally, I'm not gonna lie, like it was fun, but like it's kind of messed up. And then growing is like, you know what, you've gotten to the point where you yourself can't find that like acceptable, and to the point where you have to verbally share that with your closest ones who you don't like seeing mad or like feel a certain type of way, to let them know that you know what, in order to grow, in order to be a better person, we gotta fix this, like straight up. You know what I
exactly.
mean? So
yeah, for
no,
sure.
for sure, like give the close sign on that.
Yeah, I feel like it comes down to like the maturity too, you know, because I feel like a lot of people like they're not mature enough to handle the fact that their friends are like, even like when they tell them they're wrong, it's kind of just like they take it as a joke or whatever, right? And it's kind of like, man, like,
My
can you see, bro? Like, it's
friends
not.
are like are the biggest. Sorry, let me PG. Where's my fault? My friends are my friends are the biggest critics. If that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's like they're always on me. They're always like, you know what I mean? Like on my neck and yeah, I can't swear again. But yeah, it's just like that's the way it should be. It's like as hard as it may be on me, it's just like they want the best for me and vice versa. So I have no problem with that.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people don't see that that's what they want. Like, people when they're kind of on top of them saying like, "Hey, man, like, like, I think you should rethink this," and like, they shouldn't get defensive because it's not like they're attacking like attacking that person already. Like, like they kind of just want the best for you and kind of like they're looking out for you. And I feel like some people are not very understanding for that. Like they're so quick to call their friends like, "Oh, like you're fake, like
You're a
you're going
hater.
up against my word or like whatever," right? And it's kind of just like, man, like no, I'm not being fake. If anything, I'm caring for you, bro. And that's precisely why, like,
Exactly.
I'm telling you all of this.
'Cause
Exactly.
that's the thing. A lot of people can't like differentiate between like honest criticism and then someone just hating on them, and that's the problem. Like,
People will be
Yeah.
quick to be like, yeah, you're hating on me, or like that person just doesn't like you. Like, nah, like if someone cares about you and they tell you the truth straight up, I have more respect for them than someone who's gonna be behind me, gassing me 24/7. You know?
Yeah, like I feel like you don't want that. Like I feel like if anything, like I'd much rather have someone that's like constantly criticizing me. Well, not constantly criticizing me, but like kind of criticizing me when I deserve that criticism.
Yeah.
Because if I have someone always hyping me up to like do stuff that I shouldn't be doing, then
It feels
how
nice,
does
but
that work?
bro, like you know what I mean? It's just like it's all good.
that's the
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
Like, no one should want a yes man behind them.
Yeah.
Like, you want people that are
Yeah,
actually you want people that are gonna challenge you, like tell
Get
you
up
when you're
back in
messing up.
people are the complete opposite. You know what I mean? But
Hmm.
whatever.
yeah,
That's just society as it is today. So it goes though.
yeah. No, I mean we kind of like take it back to discrimination and stereotypes
Yeah.
and all of that, right? It's just
Yeah.
um I feel like a lot of the times when people kind of like use these stereotypes and whatnot, it kind of comes from like, those people who they have those yes people behind them, where it's like whatever they say, they're not being called out for it or, whatever, right? And so, no one's making that effort to stop it because they're scared of talking to that person that's saying it. They give so much confidence to that person that they feel like they can say whatever they want. And then it's just kind of like everyone's just kind of like afraid to speak up against that. It's kind of just like, bro, come on, man. I
I
don't
don't know.
know.
You know what I mean? Making your friends comfortable, but I feel like you should have strong morals, not only for yourself, but what's socially acceptable too. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, man. I don't know, man. I feel like a lot of times what it comes down to is just kind of like you said, Ty, it's kind of like seeing like what your circle is and who your friends are. And I don't know. I feel like if we want to continue to move forward and like continue to raise awareness for these issues, like we need to start kind of like seeing within ourselves and seeing what we believe in, right? And so if that means going up against what your friends are doing and kind of just like um you know calling out people when they're doing something that they're not supposed to or saying that something that is not right, I guess take that initiative personally. And, that's how change is going to happen over time, right? Over those people that decide to individually take it into their own hands and, continue to stand up against that.
Yeah, and like you said, if when you call your friends out for stuff like that, it can go two ways. It's like A, it's either yeah, they respect you and they change that themselves, and then boom, you guys grow together, you do your thing straight. Like you know what I mean? You go on with life. Or B, if they're completely against you and they're mocking you and joking around with you, it's just like okay, clearly this wasn't necessarily like your friend who was there to grow with you. Is more so just like your place in that person's life was convenient for whatever the reason may be, more so than actually,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? So like whether it's them staying there for longer or just you know what I mean, cutting the ties from that point on, it's just like you know where you stand with that person. That's also another way to grow, like within yourself and just morally as well. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
another to, like better yourself, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Because even like me, as I grew older, like I don't know, like I grew up like well, when I came to Canada, I came to like a really small town, and it was kind of like in a certain ways, it was very close-minded. And so as I grew up, I kind of made sure to like stray away from like those people that, they weren't willing to like see where their wrongs were, and like they weren't willing to like change, right? And at the end of the day, like just like Ty said, right, like you kind of have to analyze and say, oh, like, are these people really my friends? They don't take me serious when I say something like this, right? Like, they don't have the respect to kind of listen to what you're saying, right? And especially when it comes to like standing up for something that's completely wrong, right? And it's just I feel like that's in those types of situations that you kind of have to like just remove yourself and say, you know what, man, have it your way. You're clearly very close-minded. You're not gonna get out of this little idea that you have in your head. So I kind of just gotta walk away.
Sucks, but you gotta respect it, and that's why you mature for sure.
Nah, I don't know, man. I feel like there's a lot of diversity out there, and I feel like everyone can kind of learn like a lot from different cultures. And I feel like that's what that one thing that I really liked about Canada was that like there was so many different cultures, and they the way that cultures kind of do certain things, certain holidays that they celebrate and stuff. And I was like, I really like grew an appreciation for that. And I was kind of like, bro, like how can you hate on this, or like like how can you not like this? Because no, one thing about me, I love food, and so like when I got to taste like all this like different types of food, I was kind of like, damn, bro, people really be making fun of these like food, right? Like, because I
Yeah.
have like my best friend, he's Indian, shout out Andy, but
Shout out Andy.
like Indian food is just so good, man. And I remember when I came here, like people were always like, I heard all this thing like, oh, like Indian food doesn't look good, like all this and that, and I was like, bro, have you tasted it, man? It tastes amazing. Like, what are you saying? Like, what? Like, and I don't know, like, and like all these jokes, like from certain cultures and stuff, like, I kind of just felt like they were very close minded because, like, it doesn't really apply once you like get to like, like see beyond like, that stereotype and kind of like go out there and really try it. And, like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people can really start doing that.
Like, and I feel like a lot of people who say stuff like that, like they haven't even tried it. Like they just hear other people say that, and then they're like, I guess that's how it is, and then they just go with it. But it's not true. Like,
Yeah.
and that's the thing too. Just being closed minded, you're just limiting yourself from experiencing like all these different things and all these different cultures. Like the real big loser at the end is the person who is closed minded. At least in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
People are so quick to talk and not to listen, and that's the biggest part about like growing as a person and just like society as it is today. It's just like imagine if you were to hear two more people rather than try to talk to those two people about your personal things, how much more you'd learn. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, I understand exchanging information. Like, you know what I mean? If you had, if there's three of you, you know what I mean, understanding one another. But like, if you enter a room, the first thing you want to do is talk to them about, you know what I mean, yourself rather than hearing them out. It's just like you're missing on
Mm-hmm.
something more that could possibly like enhance you as a person. Like, you never know. Like,
Yeah, and I guess I kind of have like a question with you guys, like like I don't know about like you, Ty, or like like Adam or anything, like kind of what is like your opinion on like when people say like, oh, like this person kind of like culturally appropriating like my culture and stuff, and like you know kind of saying that, oh, they're not really respecting my culture because they're taking it to themselves and stuff. Like, what do you guys think about that?
See,
uh,
do you
I'm
want to
gonna
go
let you
first, Ty?
go first for this one. That's all you. I went first last.
Okay, fair enough. So here's my opinion about cultural appropriation. I think it depends on how the person does it. If they do it out of a place of respect, I think it's completely fine. But then if they do it out of a place of ignorance and it comes off as disrespectful, then I don't see that as fine. So for example, if let's say someone who is a Muslim is walking into a mosque, if they dress up in the culture wear that you're supposed to wear to a mosque, I don't see that as culture appropriation. I see that as them kind of respecting the culture and embracing it. But like if someone dresses in like a Muslim outfit to go to a party or something to dress up to like because they think it looks nice or something. I feel like that's coming more like
Like
that's
for the
more
Halloween parties,
like
the
for
way
a
you're like
Halloween
going to.
party example, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's more disrespectful. Like you don't really understand what the outfit is meant to like represent, what like the culture implications behind it mean. You're just doing it to like for like a part like a costume party or something. I feel like that's disrespectful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are your feelings on that, Ty?
Not like pretty much like got it down pat for the most part. My thing with it, like I said, I humor. You know what I mean? It's just like if I see something that's wrong, like depending on the day, it's either A, like I just shake my head and I just move forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like there's only so much you can say and do to like, you know what I mean, get your point across. But then there's also the other day where it's just like if I feel it like personally triggering me where to the point where I have to go up to that person let them know like my sense or two. It's just like at the end of it all, it's like I feel like if you don't have a well understanding, or if you feel like something looks appealing but not necessarily like valuing the meaning behind something, especially like clothes to say, like you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like especially clothes, it's just like there's so many ways you can go about doing that. You know what I mean? It's just like
Yeah.
that's something and appreciate it, but the fact you have to go out of your way and put that onto yourself and not necessarily understanding the meaning behind it, or to feel like you're entitled to that, I feel like that's the problem behind it. Like I feel like once someone feels entitled to something that they don't necessarily have any knowledge or any clue as to like the value of it, I feel like that is
Mhm.
about it. But like what Adam has said, pretty much got it like straight on. That's just
Yeah,
my
no.
point
I
of that.
precisely I asked that question because like I kind of feel like there's also like two sides to the story, right? When it comes to like discrimination, all that, because you have like these minority groups sometimes. Like I feel like well, actually it's not even the minority groups. I feel like sometimes it's like even other people speaking for that culture, right? And they get offended for it because the other day I saw a post where it was like or like on Twitter I went on and I saw that people were calling like dog for racist for saying the message like, oh, stay at home in different languages, right? And it was kind of just like, man, like
I feel like that's
that's
reaching.
that's what I'm saying. I feel like sometimes it's like, it's like very like it's very far fetched, and it's like they're kind of like pick around and stuff, and it's kind of just like I find it like a little bit, you know, counterproductive because, I feel like cultures, like we deserve that respect, right? Like like if you have your own culture, like you deserve that respect, right? And when people like kind of like really try to respect your culture and all that, like, and they're doing their best and they're not doing something like out of harm's way, right? And like even for example, when people they do things that are like Mexican, like like Cinco de Mayo or whatever, like here in Canada, like people were celebrated and stuff, and they don't even know what they're celebrating, so um I kind of feel like it's still like, regardless, like to a certain degree, like, instead of like being mad about it in a certain way, just kind of like, understand, see, like, try to understand where they're coming from. If they're coming from like a disrespectful point of view, then like for sure, then like you have to definitely stand up because that's the whole point of like, putting an end to it. But, if they're kind of doing something out of like, kind of like trying to be more accepting and kind of like, respect that, then I feel like it's better to kind of like, teach that person and kind of just like guide them properly. And maybe like if they did something like wrong, if they stepped like a boundary that they weren't supposed to without meaning to, like, instead of going ham at them, like, make them understand, like, hey, like, I feel like, you can go about it this way instead of doing this, right? And I feel like that's sometimes what we fail to do.
Yeah, because I feel like there's a lot of I don't know if I should call it misguided anger, but when a lot of situations like this happen, most of the time the person is just like ill-informed, or like they don't know enough. They don't know what they're doing is like causing harm. And a lot of people just lash out on them instead of like trying to educate them. And that's always, in my
Yeah.
opinion, it's like a really bad method of going about things. Like this happened, I think, like last year, like in 2019. Rihanna had a bikini walkway for like one of her fashion shows, and then she played a song that sampled a verse from the Quran, and everyone was freaking out on Twitter and social media saying, "Oh, cancel Rihanna." When in reality, she just didn't know that the song had a Quran verse in it, and she didn't know the implications of it. So it was just like the group that surrounded her didn't inform her well. She wasn't well informed, and then everyone just kind of
Mm-hmm.
freaked out at her. Which she like didn't do it on purpose to like hurt Muslims. She just kind of didn't know. And instead of people trying to like educate her and let her know why she did was wrong, everyone was just like, like burn her down, like bring her down, like
Mm-hmm.
Mm, for sure.
Yeah.
The only personal note I have in that regard kind of is, for an example, like back when we can go out before COVID, at like parties, like a social setting where like say
Yeah.
a song is on and the N word comes up, and then people who are not of the color like scream out the N word like loud and stuff. It's just like it's either my friends or the person who said it like will make eye contact with me and stare at me for a reaction. You know what I mean? It's just like fight or flight type mode. But for me, it's just like, oh, like obviously look at them. And there's like two ways that I see it. If like they look at me and it's just like, okay, I apologize. Like I'm not meaning that way. It's just in the song. It's just like it's all good. Just you know what I mean. Just try to
Mm-hmm.
refrain. You know what I mean. It's not that big of a deal. But if it's someone who's looking at me like feeling entitled, more so just like, what's the issue? It's in a song. That's where I see it as like problematic. Because the way I see it overall is like if someone knows that there's a word and a strong meaning behind it, and they look at me for not necessarily reassurance for it's okay. Like, you know what I mean? To ask if it's okay is kind of messed up in my opinion, but it's just like, you know what I mean? You could either like be the typical angry person and have someone just, you know what I mean? Like looking at you as like the typical angry person. You just like, you know what I mean? Just wants an excuse to fight. Or you can go about it in a respectful way where it's just like you look at them, it's like obviously you're uncomfortable. And it's just like, if you know that it's not okay and just simply not to do it again, it's just like, boom, that person learns. You know, like check your social surroundings or just before you even check
Yeah,
your social surroundings.
it goes
You know
back
what
to the respect thing, right? It's
I
like the respect thing. It's just like you
mean?
look at people, you're like, okay, I shouldn't say this right now. Like, like you said, Ty, like it's the time and place.
You know,
Exactly. Even if you say it behind closed doors, it's like, come on, like fix up. At the end of the day, it's just like one of those
Exactly.
like looking at them in general. That's the thing for me. It's just like I won't go off on them, but I'll obviously look at them like, yo, like that's not cool, that's uncomfortable. And it's just like I feel like if someone were to react in pit like I'm not the type of person to like flip out like that, but I know there's at least every one of my like, you know what I mean, friends of color would. But me personally, it's just like just because they would lash out and do that doesn't mean I necessarily have to. So the way I view it is like why give the typical like you know what I mean like reaction that someone's expecting when I can do it in my personal way in a way that I find like you know what I mean a way that I can find that is effective, you know what I mean. And it's just like if they know that's not cool, it's like okay, it's nothing more to say. It's like yo, like chill, never again, please, like just never again. And then
Yeah, well,
if
that's kind
one
of
of
like
those
how the stereotypes came to be, right? Because people
percent,
like are expecting like a certain reaction, right? And so,
percent, it's like I'll stare you down, not a problem, but like I'm not
mm,
gonna be in your face yelling at you and stuff. It's just like fix up. But if the person feels entitled, then you know what, like whatever happens at that point happens. But you get the point. You know what I mean? It's just like I'm not quick to be like angry and stuff like that. But whatever. If the person's like open minded and they know that they're in the wrong, it's just like all right, you can have that quick little discussion, fix it up. But if the person's ignorant as it is, like what's the point of even like you know what I mean? Trying
yeah,
to your teacher act like you know what I mean that you can influence this person who clearly doesn't care enough feeling comfortable to say something like that that makes plenty like a handful of people uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
you
It's
know,
just
for
for the
sure, I
facts,
feel
yeah.
that. I feel that.
you can't teach someone who doesn't want to be like taught. If that makes any sense, or like isn't open to that.
Yeah,
That's someone
like you
else now.
can't. Yeah, like that's like the whole idea of like you can't change someone who's not willing to change, right?
100%. Yeah, like that's someone
Yeah,
else's job. You not mine.
yeah, because it comes down to like personal, like like your own personal things. Like are you willing to change or not? Like I don't know. I feel like at the end of the day, with those types of situations, it comes down to like like the other person. It's both parties for sure. It's like the approach that you take when you go and kind of like you said, like how you approach it and like what reaction you give, and how the other person really like is willing to like listen to. And I feel like that first moment, that first like initial like like where they start to speak, like it really comes down to the tone, because if one person comes in a hostile way, I
Yeah.
feel like people would like just get really rattled, and like things just start getting out of control, right? You start losing them.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what I mean? It's just like we're all athletes. You know, is this a athlete thing specifically, or is it like a minority thing?
It's a minority
What,
thing.
what
We
do you
can talk
mean?
about
What do you
I
mean?
rugby, but Cruz, you play sports yourself, or
Yeah, I used to play football.
okay, even better. You know what I'm saying? It's just like yo, like as an athlete, it's like bro, like the amount of times you could have like cussed at your coach or like you know what I mean, swing at your
Yeah, no, I feel you for
like
sure, man.
it's like if I'm doing that every single day after school, it's just like the last thing I need to do is continue that same energy. Like, you know what I mean? At a social setting where you're supposed to have fun and stuff like that.
I
So it's just
completely
like
agree with that, man.
yeah, exactly. It's just like having you literally grow up having some sort of discipline or some sort of like controlling yourself and just being you know what I mean? And if you were to lash out, not only is that gonna ruin your image as a minority as it is, but it's also gonna ruin your image for your team. Like it goes way more than just you. Like you affect you affect your race, if that makes any sense, and as well as like the team that
Yeah.
you're planning, like your family, like everyone else. So it's just like yeah, it goes way beyond than just encountering the person one on one. You know what I'm trying to say?
No, for
Yeah, I
sure.
feel
Because
that.
even for example, when you think about like sports, like especially football, right? Like your
Yeah,
coaches, like it's very disciplined. Like like sport, like you have to be very disciplined. Your coaches, they're so quick to like punish you if you're not being like respectful of everything, right? So,
yeah,
just like you said, right? Like I feel um, like when you have those encounters with other people,
mm,
it's either you make an enemy or you make a friend, right? And it's just kind of
yeah,
like if you kind of make that person associate your culture or your ethnicity, right, with like a certain way, right, they will take that with them, and I feel like
Yeah.
that's a very important point, because if you're taking it in a certain manner, right, like, and you're making it like, very hostile and very hard for, people to be open to listen to you and stuff, right, like, I feel like all you're gonna do is just make an enemy that's potentially gonna make other enemies, because it's like a chain reaction, right? If they had like an encounter, people love to speak from like experience, right? And so, um,
Yep.
they go about it, they have the experience, and then they go tell their friends like, oh yeah, like this person, man, horrible to deal with them. I don't like dealing with this type of people, right? And so like, that's like a make or break type of moment, right? It's like either you make a friend, or or you
Yeah.
break that, like that communication between both people, right? So.
So
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but I know for sure it's just like you said you play football, and I know Adam plays rugby. It's just like if we have these grown if we have grown men hitting us like every single day after school, like we're physically being abused, I guess you could borderline call it.
Yeah.
Like, best believe I won't let some random kid, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
verbally.
you're not gonna let him break you. Like, simple as
Yeah.
that. It's just,
Like, there's way more to it than that. But at the same time, it's like, even though we may see that as like the positive way of going about things, it's just like it could also be a negative as well, because it's like if we're not verbally or we're not physically doing something about it to get that message across, it's just like, what do you do? So with that approach
Mhm.
that I mentioned earlier, it's just like that's kind of the best way that I can go about it until I can think of a different way to do it, or until I, you know what
Mhm.
I mean, look more into it. Then it's just like that's my issue at that point. But I just feel like as of right now, that's kind of the best way that I personally go through it. And who knows?
Mhm.
so
I may figure out a different way, but I don't know. That's just me. I don't know about you guys, but how do you feel about that?
you can go
Yeah, I
first,
mean,
Roy.
what are you saying?
You can go first,
Oh
Roy.
well, I guess I kind of just like the way that I feel about that is like I feel like you brought up a good point. Um, where it's like, what's like the middle ground, right? Because you can't be too quiet to the point that like you're not showing that you're serious about it,
Yeah.
but you also can't be too aggressive to go to like a point where you're like saying that, oh yeah, like I'm being very extreme about this, and like this is war, right? It's like, and I feel like that's like the whole thing, right? It's kind of just like, what do you do? I feel like it's been like a whole generational thing where it's like, we had people like maybe generations that have been more verbal and less physical, and then they weren't being taken serious because there wasn't that hostility or like that seriousness behind it. But then now we have like a group of people that are being really hostile and very like physical, but they're not being taken serious precisely because of that. They're just being violent, and so it's kind of just like, man, like what can we do as a whole, right, to find that middle ground and find that like equilibrium, right, where it's like we're not being too much of one or the other, right? And so.
Exactly. Yeah.
What do you feel? I completely agree with you. So this is changing the topic a little bit, but Ty's brought something similar to this up a bit so far. But I don't know if you guys have experienced this. I've experienced it personally. But like coming from a minority, do you guys feel that pressure where like any like social interaction that you have will probably leave like an impression on your entire culture or like ethnicity within the
Man,
person that you're
yes,
talking
bro.
with? Because whenever I'm talking with someone, I'm always scared I'm gonna do something wrong, say something wrong, that person now is gonna think, oh, all of Egyptians are like this guy. So that's a stress that I'm always living with, like 24/7 whenever I'm talking with anyone.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll tap into this a bit more just because, like, I'll easily lose track of the things I'm thinking about just because, I don't know, that's just how I am. But the best way that comes to me is high school to university. So, high school, grade 9 or whatever, coming from, I lived in a very ghetto area my entire life, pretty much. So,
Mhm.
going to this, I went to a private school for,
Okay.
what's it called, high school? Yeah. So, it was a complete different setting. So, I remember grade 9 or whatever, I'm like, all right, dominantly, like, you know what I mean? Like, non-colored people with
Hmm.
who are financially like superior than me. It's just like, all right, how can I fit, quote unquote, fit in with these people who don't
Hmm.
necessarily have anything in common with me besides liking sports? Yeah, no, it's just like, all right, I'm not angry 24/7 just because, you know what I mean. It's just like being in a ghetto area. I don't have a lot to, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, necessarily like look forward to besides whatever, like you name it. Just I don't have much to offer type of thing, if that makes any sense. But you know what I mean? Just being black as it is with all those stereotypes behind that, and as well as like playing sports, it's just like, all right, I'm not that smart. All I ever do is play. You know what I mean? All I ever can do and talk about is sports, like football as it is. So What can I do to do that? All right, so I went out of my way to be nicer to people. You know what I mean? That was taking advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
Also went out of my way to speak in a way that wasn't necessarily like me. You know what I mean? Like less slang, less like you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
more proper, if that makes any sense. And then I realized that I was just killing who I was as a person. I was going out of my way to be something that I couldn't necessarily like, you know what I mean? Like relate to or
Mm-hmm.
see as acceptable to myself. You know what I mean? Just kind of killing myself in that sort of way. So as years went on, I realized that you know what, I can't be killing myself to do all these things to please other people. Like you know what I mean? At the end of the day, you want to make friends because that's just how high school is. But it's just like
Yeah.
going about it the wrong way. So obviously I fixed that up. Whatever, cool, so be it. And then with it being in university, like first year, you know what I mean? I don't know about you guys, but I've definitely met like a lot of people, and being black on the football team, it's just like all right, like minority, uh, athlete, blah blah blah, and then you know what I mean? Talk about that. Then it's city is like, all right, he's from Toronto, so they'll bring up like, like rappers that I just can't stand at all. Like you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
music that I can't relate to, but this is all like tied to the fact that you know what, like he's black, he's an athlete, and he's from Toronto. Like easy, like I got this, like easy for me to have a conversation with about things that A
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand and B just things that I just could care less about. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like socially you don't want to be like, hey, I don't like that stuff. You know what I mean? Like who do you want to talk to? Be like, hey,
Yeah.
I don't.
You can't really say it out. Be like, oh yeah, like that's not really me, bro.
Exactly. So after like the first couple of like, you know what I mean, like social settings or whatever, I would jokingly go about it, like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, I completely love him. Like that's my favorite artist and this and that. Like, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's just like you can't like once people make stigmas like that towards you, it's just like they already have a picture painted of you that you yourself can't even like, you know what I mean? Show to someone. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I don't know, it's kind of on a deeper level, but it's just like once someone does that about you and towards you without even having a chance, you know what I mean? Express yourself. It's just like
It
those type of
limits you.
people personally, you know what I mean? I keep them as like at a certain distance. It's like, yeah, okay, I get the effort behind it, but it's just like once someone already makes a stigma or once someone has a perception about you without you even giving a chance to like necessarily explain yourself, it's just like it kind of defeats the whole purpose of like
Yeah.
who you are as a human, if that makes any sense. Let's kind of like past the deep point, but it's just like yeah, the whole stigma behind who I am and like what I value. If that makes any sense. It's like the person
No,
already
I agree.
yeah.
I agree. I agree for sure. Because even for example, like going back to what Adam said, like I don't know, like what he was talking about, like oh, like you feel like you represent your whole culture, right? And it's just like kind of like when I see people like in the way that they think about Mexican culture, right? It's kind of just like I kind of just don't want them to like associate it with oh yeah we drink a lot of alcohol or we're great party people, bro. Like yeah, like okay, like I kind of want them to have like a good image, say like like Mexican people are nice, they're really good people and they're people that you can always rely on. And that's kind of like what I kind of bring up with myself because I feel like, just like Adam said, like I do represent my culture and I do represent like, you know, the opinions that people will have about my culture, right? And so like, going back to the point that I made about like, making a friend or, making an enemy, like, I want that person to kind of leave, you know, with the impression that, Mexican people are nice and Mexican people are not necessarily just the stereotypes and they're, but they're beyond that. And that's kind of what I always try to like like put into place where it's like I try to always show the best of me and like make sure that people can respect me and also my culture and say that what, like I guess I shouldn't really attach those stereotypes to that culture because they're not really like that. And I kind of show them that those stereotypes are beyond Mexican people, and so
Yeah.
it's just that's kind of how I feel about it too, just representing my country, my culture, like my people. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. It's very uncomfortable for sure though when you're put into the spot when people have certain ideas of how well, like things that you do like and things that you don't like.
Yeah.
And then they're like presenting you with them and then you're just kind of just like, man, how do I tell them that I don't really like this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like uncomfortable on both parts. And even to like add on a little bit to what you said, it's like with being nice, for an example, because like not even to like brag myself, but I feel like I'm a pretty genuine person. So like when I do something nice, it's not like I think of it as like, yeah, I did that for you or anything like that. So like with that being said, and I've seen this like myself, for an example, like at work, like I'll see one of my coworkers help someone, they'd be like, okay, thank you. And then say if I were to help them, they'd be like, oh, wait, whoa, like, wow, thank you. And then like kind of changing their demeanor. It's just like they already have the
Hmm.
I'd come off as like aggressive, but when I'm like being pretty genuine, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
meaning
like hits them. They don't know what to say.
it's
Like,
they're just like, wait, like why are you nice? Like why aren't you like, you know what I mean? It's just, like they're surprised. I'm like, no, like I work here. Like this is who I am. Like I don't know why you would think otherwise, but like fair enough, I guess. To each his own. You know what I mean? It's just like I
Yeah.
get positive thing because they're not like saying this stuff out loud, but it's just like the meaning behind it or the message behind it is like it can be perceived that way for sure. You know?
Hmm. Not for sure.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. I agree. Well, I guess like I guess to wrap things up and kind of just like um come to a conclusion. I feel like at the end of the day, things like that, like like stereotypes, discrimination, and like as people grow up with those like stereotypes and discrimination, like I feel like it's up to like us as like our people from our own culture to kind of like stand up for ourselves and like our cultures and say, you know what, man, like I'm gonna prove this person that we're beyond those stereotypes and that we really are great people and stuff. And then I guess it's like also to like the outside public, like they have to challenge themselves to try not to like fall susceptible to those stereotypes and believe them, and like kind of like make sure that it doesn't get passed down to to like their future generations, right? Like their kids and stuff, like making sure that they don't grow up hearing those stereotypes, and like hopefully like we can potentially come to like a point where those stereotypes are not really something that are like around, so
Yeah, and most importantly to yourself too. You know what I mean? I know you mentioned before, like for your culture, and you know what I mean, like getting rid of the stigmas and just you know what I mean, bettering the image of what people or the perception that people have of it. But it's also more so like growing yourself too. You know what I mean? Like using your culture to like. I'm not necessarily saying there's some things about certain cultures that aren't good. You know what I mean? But it's like notifying like the things that aren't necessarily morally acceptable to yourself as well. You know what I mean? It's just
Mhm.
like going through your culture and going through yourself as well. Like what
Like
you
pick
said
your poison type of thing.
exactly. Like have your own voice as
Yeah.
well. Besides like just trying to represent your culture all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Anything you guys say at him?
I mean, honestly, I think you guys covered everything. Like, there's just so many like implications of like prejudice and little things that like there is like big effects of prejudice, like stuff at workplaces and like getting jobs, but there's also all the little things that kind of build up, and like you don't really see them on the surface or you don't see them if you're on the outside, but there's just so many little things that build up, and they just sometimes they get as big as those big implications. uh, but a lot of it is definitely unnoticed. But I think that's it, really.
Yeah, no, actually, I think that's a good way to wrap it up.
So
To be honest,
I want to thank you so
yeah,
much for agreeing to come on here and talk with us for this
Nah,
hour.
we
thank
really appreciate it, bro. It was
you.
great to have you here.
Nah, I appreciate you guys having me. It was a good talk, bro. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, sounds
All right.
good, bro. Okay. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast, and we hope to see you here on the next episode where we might talk on another topic. And we're gonna for sure talk about like men's health in general. So we hope you enjoyed, and we hope that you guys have a great time, and we hope to see you later.
We'll see you guys later. Goodbye.